Shalom, shalom, everybody. We are back from our lunch break. And I said that we would continue looking at Vayikra 23 in regards to the seventh month, as we've looked at Matzot, Pesach and Matzot and Shavuot. Just before we get into the seventh month, one thing that also stands out every time, or when you see here, bring an offering made by fire to Yahweh, you see a sweet fragrance to Yahweh. A sweet fragrance to Yahweh. So we also understand that when you do things Yahweh's way, it's pleasing aroma before him. That's when we become the fragrance of Messiah. This is what, it's not as opposed to when Israel were whoring and they became a stench to his nostril. It's like putting a branch to his nose. That's something that he doesn't receive. But yet when we are doing that, which is a sweet fragrance and it's pleasing to him, it's accepted by him, So we come to the seventh month. And the beginning of the seventh month is Yom Teruah. And with it being the first day of the month, that's when we need to look for the moon. So when it says you do not know the day or the hour, it's based on the fact that we need to be observant in looking at the lights in the sky so that we know our master's timing. And we know that he's coming on Yom Kippur. But we'll only know when Yom Kippur is when we know Yom Teruah that starts the seventh month. Now on Yom Teruah, as I said earlier this morning, that Rabbinic Judaism has called Yom Teruah Rosh Hashanah, and then they want to have some extra biblical writings that try and, or through the sages and all through their sayings that say this is when Yahweh created Adam, so it's a renewal of the creation and everything else. Don't listen to those things. We stick to Scripture. Yahweh's given us everything we need with the foundation of the Torah of Moshe, which proclaims Messiah, then lessons in what will happen if we do not return to Yahweh through that which is given to us in the prophets. Then we have the writings, which is a bit of history further in that, and the Psalms and the Proverbs to teach us how to praise. And then we have the renewed writings, which further witnesses of the life, death, and resurrection of our Master. So we have all this for us, and we shouldn't need to go to extra hearsay sources, if you will, to follow traditions that don't line up with Scripture. And the seventh new moon, I kind of think that perhaps some of the reasons why they had to start calling it Rosh Hashanah, etc., is because the only instruction that's given for Yom Teruah is you have a set-apart gathering, a remembrance of Teruah. You do no servile work, you bring an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And the remembrance of Teruah is important to understand. I've sent out messages a few weeks ago. It's also in today's Torah notes, looking at the word Teruah. I think there's 33 times Teruah is used, and I've been into every passage, so I encourage you to go look at that if you want to dig more into what the Teruah is, what the sounding is. And we understand that blessed are those who know the sounding or the Teruah, they walk in the light of your face, O Yahweh. So the remembrance of Teruah that we are to have is that it's the awakening blast. We understand the parable of the 5 wise maidens and the 5 foolish maidens, that when the awakening blast came, they all had trimmed their lamps, but the foolish ones didn't have oil in their lamps. So it's a picture again of that awakening that's coming as described in the revelation that Yochanan is given for the book of Chazon, of the revelation of our Master and the seals that begin to be opened, the trumpets that are sounding. Sorry. And so the remembrance of Teruah that we have is the remembrance of sounding is we have to go back to Shavuot. At Shavuot, we're reminded of the marriage covenant. And that's Mount Sinai when the trumpet sounded long, when the voice of Yahweh was loud and the mountains trembled. We also know at Shavuot there was a sound like a rushing of the wind, and the Spirit of Yahweh descended upon the people, and there was this big sound, because we also have to understand, which I'm going to mention now, I didn't mention at Shavuot, is that we have a principle that highlights a marriage. At Shavuot was the announcement of a marriage, that Yahweh's entered into covenant with Israel when he gave them a conditional clause. If you guard my commands, then you will be my treasured possession. You'll be a people for a possession, a set-apart priesthood. You'll be mine. They said, we shall do. And the trumpet sounded long, and he gave them the marriage covenant, the conditions for the marriage. This in ancient times would be understood as the first trumpet, announcing a marriage. The last trumpet is understood as the time now when the two parties are now come together. So we have the remembrance of sounding so that we go back to Shavuot and we remember that we are betrothed. We've received the marriage covenant on our heart. And at Shavuot, we're given the command to remember that we were slaves in Mitzrayim. So there's this theme of remembrance that runs all the way through the feasts for good reason. Because why we remember at Shavuot that we were once slaves in Mitzrayim is to remind us who we are now in Messiah. That's not going back to old ways. It's a remembrance. And when we have a remembrance meal in our Master at Pesach, we're reminded of the death, life, and resurrection, or life, death, and resurrection of our Master, so that we are rid of sin. We no longer sin. He's cleansed us from sin, and we must stay in that state as we realize we must keep our wedding garments clean. And coming to Yom Teruah, it's a clear reminder for us to be wise maidens that have been walking in the fear of Elohim, because that's the beginning of wisdom, and that we're walking according to the Spirit, having oil in our lamps, having been sealed with the pledge of our inheritance, so that we can endure as the call for the endurance of the set-apart ones is given in Chazon. So when we have a remembrance of Teruah, we are clearly reminded that we are a bride that is to be ready, that we are not suddenly having to scurry around getting ready, but that we are ready. And when we look at this in the cycle of feasts, we see patterns emerging that teach us valuable lessons from scriptures that tie in with his appointments. And in the message that's given, I think it's to Sardis, where in Chazon, where the Master said that you will have pressure 10 days, or some of you, for 10 days you'll have pressure, and some of you will be thrown into prison, and some of you will be put to death, etc., take courage, etc. So we see that's likened to the time between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur, from the 1st of the 7th month to the 10th of the 7th month. We also have a mirror of this in type between our Master having spent 40 days after his resurrection with the taught ones, and then ascending from the Mount of Olives and telling his taught ones to wait for the set-apart Spirit, which would be 10 days later at Shavuot, where they faced intense persecution. So we get this idea teaching us the parable type of the intense pressures that will come before our Master fetches his bride. And as we look at Chazon and we see in type the period of the first trumpet of the 7 trumpets that sounded, I just want to highlight the first trumpet that's spoken of in Chazon is the first of the last. Because the trumpet that sounded long on Mount Sinai is the announcement. Now, in Chazon, in the Revelation, the trumpets begin to sound, and there's a series of 7 trumpets unleashing the wrath of Yahweh upon the earth. It's the 7 of the last, the final trumpets that are bringing in our Master's coming. The first one, the first of the last, is the awakening blast that says your husband is coming. We must also take note that our Master is not coming on Yom Teruah, as many are erroneously teaching, because it doesn't fit the pattern. Then some want to have some rapture kind of theories. The rapture, if you want to have some kind of plucking out, Scripture is very clear who's going to be plucked out, and it's the wrong. So Yom Teruah is not when our Master comes out of the most set-apart place to fetch his bride. That is when the day of Yahweh, the revelation that's starting to be made known, and he starts opening up, sounding the trumpets and pouring out his wrath. And as we see, doesn't matter how tough it gets, people still refuse to repent. And so we have this reminder that we are to be guarding our garments. And then coming 10 days later, we are told to, on the day of Yom Kippur, to afflict our beings. And that we've just been through that recently, so it should still be fresh in your mind. That's when we do fast, because we're busy with the inner man. That affliction is a humbling of oneself with introspection in the inner man, so we set aside the things of the flesh. What we also take note of is that this text for Yom Kippur is a powerful text to highlight to many people when a day starts. A day starts at sunset and it ends at sunset. Not according to some traditions that say 6 p.m. to 6 p.m., because it's sunset to sunset and the seasons vary. So it says here in verse 32, It is a Sabbath of rest to you, and you shall afflict your beings on the 9th day of the new moon at evening, from evening to evening. So we are told on the 10th day of the 7th new moon is Yom HaKippurim. And then the instructions for that is on the 9th day at evening, from evening to evening, you afflict your beings. So it's a nice text to show that on the 9th at sunset begins the 10th. So just a nice text in scripture to help you show others why a day starts at sunset and ends at sunset. The Sabbath of Sabbaths is what Yom Kippur is referred to, because this is the only day outside of the weekly Sabbath that is called a Sabbath. The other feasts are Sabbath-like observances where we treat it like a Sabbath with the set-apart days. And even in the days of Messiah in the flesh of man, when the first day of unleavened bread was called a high Sabbath, because that's what it was referred to as. It wasn't the weekly Sabbath, as some try and get their timing. When he was here in the flesh, it was the 4th day of the week, that he was the 14th. So the 5th day of the week would have been the beginning of Matzot, the set-apart day, the first day where you have it's no servile work, and it was regarded as a Sabbath-like day. But in the Greek mindset, they understood what the Yehudim were following, so it became culturally known as a high Sabbath. Or, so then many people have taken that to be the weekly Sabbath at that time, which it wasn't. But we treat Yahweh's, as we said right from the beginning, he sets the Sabbath as the standard. So we treat the set-apart days like Sabbaths. But the Yom Kippur is the only one that's actually called the Sabbath of Sabbaths, outside of the weekly Sabbath. Did you want to share?
Just on that, obviously everything points to what Yeshua did.
Yes.
So when it says that first of the first fruits is on the morrow after the Sabbath,
yes,
that is when he did it.
Yes.
Now, every year that our cycles don't fall on that timeline, but it points back to what he did.
Yes.
So if you don't wave on the first day, you don't point back.
Yes, I wanted to touch on that. So let's go back, because this is what I like about the feast, because it is a wonderful wheel within a wheel that is connected, because if we need to understand the cogs and how they work so that we get it all right. And so we understand that when our master died, and this is why it's so important that we understand the timing, because I mentioned earlier that some traditions have it that the 16th, irregardless of the day, you wave the sheaf. Now, that presents a problem to highlighting the pattern of pointing to Messiah, and you end up denying Messiah when you follow a wrong timing and pattern that is of man. And this is why I say the pattern has to be as follows. There might be some weeks where there will be more than 3 days and 3 nights between when we have the Passover meal and the waving of the sheaf. There can be even up to 7 days, because it can be like that. But so what we have to understand is the pattern is as follows. You have the death, then you have the meal, the remembrance meal. And after the remembrance meal, there's a Sabbath. And once you have the Sabbath, you then have the Omer Reshit, the waving of the first. It has to follow that pattern. There may be times when the 14th falls on the Sabbath. And then some people take that first day as the waving of the sheaf, when actually it's the first day of Matzot, so it's not yet the Sabbath during that week. I'm just giving some time implication there. The other time, sometimes we have the 14th on the 6th day of the week, which would make the beginning of Matzot on the Sabbath. Now, here's what we also need to realize. When you begin Matzot on the Sabbath and you have that remembrance meal through that night, that's the beginning of Matzot. You then have to go all the way to the next Shabbat, because you have to have a death, a remembrance of that death, a Sabbath, and then the waving. Why? Because it follows the pattern. If you don't, you miss out the pattern of our master, Yeshua, coming out of the grave at the end of Sabbath as master of the Sabbath, because that's a picture of the millennial reign. At the end of the 7th millennial reign, he will destroy Satan, and then sin will be no more. So there's all these little patterns that if we don't follow correct timing, we miss the witness of Yeshua Messiah.
So when the Jews automatically do the 16th, because
yes,
they don't?
Because they're denying Messiah. So there's this automatic 16th, you wave the sheaf. It's wrong. It may sometimes fall on the 16th, but it's not every year. We have to follow the pattern, and it'll always be a first day of the week. And that's where we can, as I said, get 7 completed Sabbaths. So then coming back to Yom Kippur, we see that this is when our master will come out of the most set apart place, because this is when the 7th trumpet of the last trumpets in Chazon is sounded. And that is when our master then comes out of the most set apart place. I went through Vayikra 16 a couple of weeks ago when we looked at the duty of the high priest on Yom Kippur and how the change of garments that will take place. So our master will come, and he then takes off his priestly robes because his role of interceding before the throne is now over. And he puts on his kingly robes. He's coming, Devar Yahweh, to come and fetch his bride. And he's riding on a horse with the sword in his mouth to destroy the nations. And so we understand without a high priest in the most set apart place in the heavens, the door is shut. So the fools that have been running around trying to find oil, they will not get in, because you have to be ready. I'll even go so far as this. You should be ready by Yom Teruah. But then let's just see the cycle of the pattern. If you're not ready by Shavuot to receive a renewal of the covenant, then how do you get in? Then how do you get to Shavuot? So if you don't have the Pesach meal because you haven't been immersed, you're not going to get in at Yom Kippur. So it all starts with an acceptance of who the master is. Now, there might be some people that cyclically only come to the master before they've had a Pesach meal, and then the master comes at you. We understand there's still that dying to self being raised in him and being received. But when we follow the cyclical pattern and we neglect to actually do what he says according to his appointed times and keep the appointments, we risk being rejected as not being known. The other thing that we must highlight before we get to Sukkot is we've heard people say over the years, when am I supposed to rest on the Sabbath if all I'm doing is studying the word? And then you say, well, you sleep at night like you do every other night. Okay? I mean, we understand the Sabbath command. We are told to perform the Sabbath, which is the Hebrew word asah, which is to do. So there's a service that's done on the Sabbath. This service is different to the occupational work that you do when you're carrying out the obedience of using your talents and the gifts that Yahweh is giving you in the world. Now, coming into his presence, we are to perform the Sabbath. On the Sabbath, there were extra offerings that were done. There were more than the daily offerings. There was a service that was done. There was a set-apart gathering that's called, which calls for your utmost attention. Yeshayahu 58 carries on further to highlight whether we see that as a culmination of Yom Kippur in terms of the fast that's called and how they were not doing what Yahweh required and they were doing their own things for own gain, and looking at that as a weekly pattern because every Sabbath points to the Sabbath of Sabbaths, is that we are not to be doing our own pleasures, thinking our own thoughts, doing our own ways. So let's take that practically. That means we thank Yahweh for technology that our brothers and sisters can join online with us now because this is for our gathering. But you don't go on a Sabbath and spend time looking at your favorite YouTube videos and laughing along or doing searches and, you have discussions outside of the word, which we should be thinking on the word. Oh, what is it? Oh, no, I'll quickly look at. What was it? No. Sabbath isn't a time for you to be scrolling through the things that you might look for in the week or playing games, either on a phone or board games. We have sometimes, people just say, oh, no, I'm done with the reading, so now I'm off. I'm going to go for a hike. I'm going to do a bicycle trail. I'm going to do my own things. That's the things you should be doing in the week. Sabbath is intimacy with our master. And performing the Sabbath is giving one's utmost attention. We've had people in the past over the years, and they'll come on Sabbath. Now, we should say, thank Yahweh for the Sabbath. But we've had people coming going, and it's all about tone and body language. They go, oh, I'm so glad it's the Sabbath. It's like, no, I can just switch off. And they don't pay close attention, and that's the wrong heart because you should be fully alert, fully awake, fully attentive to the Master's presence. And this is where we highlight now, we were talking at lunch about it, and I need to share this. We need to perform the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a set-apart day unto Yahweh. This is when we gather. We don't switch off. Sabbath's not a time to switch off. It is a time to not think about the things that you are doing in the week, because another analogy of picking up sticks on the Sabbath, there was guys that were tasked to go and fetch wood, and perhaps this guy that was picking up sticks in the wilderness was one that was gathering it for the slaughter place, but he wasn't supposed to do it. So that another way of considering that is sitting on the Sabbath thinking, okay, I read a few chapters, now I'm going to plan my week, and how am I going to deal with this one? How am I going to do that? That's like picking up sticks on the Sabbath. We are warned in Scripture through the events that took place when Nehemiah was governor. And the traders were coming to the wall, and he warned them. He closed the gates, said, close the gates for the Sabbath. He said, you stop trading. And he warned them a couple of times with some stern words, and they didn't come back. Because guarding the gates of the Sabbath is also about guarding our mindset from doing business. And some people say, I'm not doing business, but I'm just thinking about how I'm going to do business. No, you should, no, that's still doing business. Okay? We are to be about the master's business. And that doesn't mean every other day you switch off from the master. Okay, we must get balance here. We need to meditate day and night because it's a light for our path. But the Sabbath is a day for us to be in the master's presence, immersed in his word. Yes, we're not 24 hours in the word. You can sleep your normal sleep as you should. You know, some people want to sleep the whole day Sabbath because they got business meetings galore the whole week and they're missing the point. They are not, we've had sometimes some people say they're gathering, but they're sleeping. How do you pay attention when you're sleeping in a gathering? You know? So these are small little things, and it sounds pedantic, but it's so important. Imagine, this is what it is. Collectively, we as a bride are coming into our husband's presence and before his face. Now, imagine if you only got to see your beloved once a week and every couple of months with a more intense time, if you will, sometimes 7 days at a time, etc., twice, and you're there and, an hour or two into it, you kind of get bored with your beloved, or, 2 days in of the 7 days, you think, I'll see you in another day. I've got things to do. How does that reflect on one's intimacy with the one who saved you and paid the price for your life?
Because the rest refers to resting from the physical labor
Yes.
that you do this
Yes.
day.
Yes.
It doesn't mean lying on the couch,
No.
blanket over you, and somebody's talking and you're sleeping.
No.
How would you feel if you're talking and the person you're talking to is sleeping?
Yes. Well, for us who are teachers, we often feel that. But just think. We got to take serious the solemnity is the word for Yahweh's appointments, And so we look at Yom Kippur ultimately being that when he fetches his bride. And then you got a period from Yom Kippur to Sukkot is what I firmly believe. Firstly, he's coming to tread the winepress in his wrath. This is where we see the prophecy of who is this coming from Edom. We see that coming from the south of Botzra, and Botzra means sheepfold, where he's coming to gather people into the winepress, which he's going to trample in his wrath. And who is this? And there's blood on his garments. It's because Yahweh said, it's I am coming. Now, it's a destruction of Yahweh coming on the sons of disobedience, as preceded by all the trumpets that are sounded, the seals that are opened, and finally he comes. And then he's fetching his bride. Those who have died in Messiah will be raised first, and those who are still alive will be caught up together. And this is what I believe this period, in a sense, between Yom Kippur to Sukkot, is the gathering from the four corners of the earth to Jerusalem, to be with our master for the wedding feast, and then to establish the millennial reign. Okay, and so we've just been through Sukkot, but coming to Sukkot, again, it's a celebration. I like what the commands is. You shall celebrate a festival to Yahweh for 7 days. This means that you don't just celebrate one day, go off and do your occupational work for 2 or 3 days, come back. You celebrate for 7 days. But out of that 7 days, the first and the last are the set-apart Sabbaths, gatherings, where you do no servile work, because that's like a Sabbath, but your celebration is still happening. Now, on the first day, we actually didn't dig into this at Sukkot when we were sharing at Sukkot, although I did send my Sukkot notes out before in preparation. And I know not everybody necessarily goes through the notes, but I encourage you to do that in time to come because it will equip you for further things. The instruction in regards to Sukkot is, you shall take for yourselves on the first day fruit of good trees, branches of palm trees, twigs of leafy trees, willows of the stream, and you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim for 7 days. You don't just rejoice 2 out of the 7. And then the 8th is still a celebration. It's just the closing festival. It doesn't mean you stop rejoicing and you don't dwell in booths anymore. It's still part of the feast. It's the closing. But on the first day, what is the palm trees, the good fruit trees, the leafy trees, the willows? It would all remind them of the terrain that they had passed through in the wilderness, in a celebration of our Master's provision. Because when we think that men are like trees and everything else, we understand this picture of being like a tree planted by the waters. And every one of these trees through the wilderness would have reminded them of Yahweh's protection, his provision, his sustenance, and highlighting being able to be reminded that he is the one that's brought you to the booth, and therefore celebrate, waving it before him. So wherever we may in a scattered state be keeping Sukkot, we might not all have willows or palm trees or different kinds of, but the trees that are in your area. On the first day, you go and take some and you wave before Yahweh because it's a witness of Yahweh's protection and provision. And the fruit, the fruit of good trees. So you bring, also it's typically understood as the fruit harvest. So this is a time when you come before Yahweh and you bring the fruit of the good trees, the branches of palms, twigs of leafy trees, and your willows, because it's a wonderful picture of his complete provision and sustenance, showing that the fruit of your labors is a celebration of him. And so it's important that this 7-day festival is celebrated as a full festival, not as only regarding 2 days as the only days I need to worry about, and I'll quickly zip in and out to work and back. As long as I'm staying in a tent, it's fine. I'm keeping the feast. No, where's your offering by fire? Where's your celebration every day? Now, how do you celebrate in the booth of Yahweh when you're mixing with the world in occupational work? It doesn't work. So these are things that I think this year we established during Sukkot, many saying thank you for this. So I hope that we are able to set a standard now by which people can grow.
Also, just if you don't booth, it says that you put stay in a booth so that you remember that they stayed in booths. If you don't stay in a booth, you're not remembering that they sojourned through the...
No. Also, we've heard some people excuse away the need to stay in booths. A booth, a sukkah, a temporary dwelling. So, it's obviously not your home where you are permanently dwelling. Okay. And some people say, it's only for native born in Israel to dwell in booths. And so I'm not a native born in Israel, so I don't need to know. Let me help you get clarity here today. Ephesians 2 makes it clear that we were once foreigners and strangers to the covenants of promise. But now, by the blood of Yeshua, we've been grafted in, brought near, grafted in, and we are as native born. In other words, we receive our new identity in Messiah. So therefore, in him, through immersion in him and partaking of the Pesach meal and obedience to his Sabbaths and feasts, we are Yisrael. We are native born. So therefore, we dwell in booths to remember that for 40 years they dwelt in booths. But we get to do it for 7 days plus 1. Okay, 8th day is a closing festival. So you still stay in that booth. And so we need to understand that this is Yahweh saying, these are my times. I want everybody to be together. We walk individually in the face of the Master every day. But this is a bringing together and separating these times as times where we are not laboring in the field, doing our service as a light to the nations, but this is the light for the house coming together as pictured through the set apart place and the most set apart place as the tent of appointment. I just see here Carol saying the new grain to be brought in verse 16 is it the one that has to make the 2 loaves in verse 17? If so, how do we know that the 2 loaves we make are from new grain? There's also further instructions in verse 18, which were required, which we know we can't bring as Messiah has fulfilled them. Weren't the 2 loaves fulfilled as well when the set-apart spirit fell on those who were gathered in Acts 2? Not sure my question is making sense. Okay, so now you're saying, let me just follow up. In verse 16, it says, you shall bring a new grain offering to Yahweh. Okay, and then you said in verse 17, bring from your dwellings a wave offering of 2 loaves of bread. Okay, so you're asking, how do we know that the 2 loaves are from new grain? Okay. And verse 18 says, and besides the bread, hold on, where are we here? Verse 18, okay, ascending offering with their grain offering, drink offering, and offering made by fire. Okay, 7 lambs a year old. Okay, I think what we got to understand here is, what is it that we do every year? Because there isn't a temple, a physical temple, where the Levitical priesthood, remember, we're looking at the order of the Levitical priesthood in its service and what was required, and what we learn from this in the Master. We know that if we go back into that time, the sheaf of the first is waved. It's that sheaf to declare, right, now you can start harvesting. Now, of the harvest, people go out in their harvest. Now we must be careful of rabbinic traditions that say, I marked the first ones that grew up, and that's the ones that, it's in your harvest. The first of your harvest you keep aside, because the first represents putting Yahweh first, and everything else represents then, if Yahweh's first, it is all his, but I don't neglect to do him. So of your harvest that you bring, before you take anything, you give a first to Yahweh. And of that first, the new grain that's come, it's all new grain for that season. It's not like there's old grain and new grain in the same harvest period. It's all new grain. But you're not taking grain from the past year to bring a wave offering of the bread and the loaves that are made. It's made from the harvest of this year. That's what's the new grain. It's not new and old in the same harvest period. I hope that makes sense. Okay, and in terms of the lambs and the young bull and the 2 rams, we know that they were all shadow pictures of the coming good matters that our Master in his sacrifice has completed. So yes, in many ways we see the feast of Pesach and Matzot and Shavuot in type has been fulfilled in the Master's first coming. That doesn't mean we neglect to rehearse the instructions of having a Passover meal, getting rid of the leaven, and having a gathering on Shavuot where we remember we were slaves in Mitzrayim. And in all of these, we always come before the Master to bring our offerings. Every feast, it's required for everyone to bring their offerings according to the way Yahweh's blessed you. So it's a celebration that goes and putting Yahweh first. And what we then see is the 7th month, we know, we also rehearse the various instructions, remembrance of Teruah, the afflicting of our beings, and the dwelling in booths. We know that is still to be completed. So there are certain feasts where we understand, because it's been fulfilled in the application of his first coming, doesn't set aside the need for us to continue the rehearsals of the commands that are given forever, like a night of watches, eating lamb, getting rid of the leaven out of our houses, having a remembrance on Shavuot that we were once slaves in Mitzrayim, having a set-apart gathering, bringing an offering made by fire. I hope this all makes sense. I'm trying to get clarity here. So to answer the question,
maybe we waved 2 loaves, but we didn't bake it.
No.
It's not exactly, if I understand.
No.
It's just symbolic.
Yes, when we wave 2 loaves on Shavuot, we are doing the symbol of what the word is reflect. So it becomes a visual representation of remembrance. We weren't out physically in the field, because in the Southern Hemisphere, our seasons are opposite. So we wouldn't get much grain this season out of that, but it is symbolic. But we do take note, I think at that time, the bread that was made to be brought was made from that harvest that was done that year. We also told that you will not eat. Yes, you won't eat of the new bread or roasted grain until the wave offering is done. You know? So
we wave the first sheep.
yes.
You still eat old.
Yes.
grain
Yeah.
until you've brought your first fruit
Yes.
offering.
Yes. And then you
Then
begin
can-
to eat. Yes.
First must go to Yahweh.
Yes. Yahweh's always put first. Also, there was something else we were just talking about. Oh, it's slipped my mind now. Hopefully get back to it. As we were discussing just different things. Did I mention everything? Okay. All right, Renee's saying, and when he comes to destroy the nations, a third remain and he rules for 1,000 years till the dragon goes in the pit. Okay, I just want to clarify, going through Chazon again. Firstly, when Yahweh comes and a third, when he starts pouring out his wrath and a third of mankind is destroyed, that means there's 2/3 still left over. And then it doesn't go on a third. There's still, out of that 2/3. Now, there are some that obviously will make it into the reign that aren't part of Messiah in the first resurrection. Okay? And as Yom Kippur, there's a couple of things that happen on Yom Kippur, which I didn't touch on. Thank you, Renee, for reminding me this. Is that there's the 2 goats, one for Yahweh and one for Azazel. The one for Yahweh is an ascending offering put on the slaughter place. The one for Azazel, Aharon would put his hands on that. And it's basically a transference type, if you will, of all the sins of Israel that's been confessed, and it's taken out into the wilderness by the hand of a fit man. And it's symbolic of the 2 workings of our master in his one perfect work. And that is atoning sacrifice for our sins, coming to die for us, and also removing our sins from us so that we can be presented as an acceptable bride before him. Azazel is understood historically as the one that tried to stop the covenant-making process with Avram. And Avram chased the birds away because it was also one of the fallen ones that was head of one of the fallen ones that came and corrupted themselves. So there's a picture again of that taking Azazel, the goat for Azazel, into the wilderness, is also a picture of when our master comes, he binds Satan for that 1,000-year reign that he's ruling on this earth. So while he's ruling on this earth, Satan is bound. He can do nothing. He's let loose at the end to see if he can corrupt whoever he can before the final Armageddon, the battle against Yahweh, and try and get as many on his side as he can. And after that, he's thrown into the lake of fire, and then the judgment seat opens up. And those that aren't found in the book of life are thrown into the lake of fire. That's the second death. That's at the second resurrection. But those that are part of the first resurrection don't face the judgment seat at the end of the 7th millennium before the renewal comes. Okay, so Sukkot reminds us of a renewal that's coming through the 8th day, the Shemini Atzeret. It's 3 days ago, so it should still be fresh in your mind. Okay, and if you don't know what it is, go watch the video. So we understand that there's everything that goes about these feasts. In Vayikra 23, it's very clear Yahweh is concerned about us being on time and being present. There's a difference between being there and being present. Okay, you'll get what I mean. I mean, there's a lot of people that are there, but they're not all there, and, it's almost like it's not even that the lights are on and nobody's home. The lights are off and nobody's home, and we need to be people that have lights on and at home and listening, because this is what it's about in our master's presence. And so dwelling in booths is a joy. And you know what? We're going to experience every year something new, something awkward, teaching us to rejoice. But think about 7 days over 40 years. Would you rather rejoice for 7 days or have to experience what our fathers went through for 40 years? And it was for 40 years because of disobedience. So it teaches us a valuable lesson. I want to be obedient at least for 7 days. We want to be obedient every day, but you get the picture. And dwelling in booths can be a very encouraging thing. And I hope that this year has inspired more to want to be hungry to do more for next year, if our master hasn't come and taken us to be with him next Yom Kippur. There, Nicole's saying, be on time and be present.
Having along people, I was thinking of a bride gets gifts for the wedding, for her wedding. Now he's saying something new and something awkward.
Something new and something awkward. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay, I've kind of ran through, as I said, I think there's about 150 pages regarding this chapter 23. So there's more than enough to go dig into words, to dig into more things there. I've set forward the pattern and the cycle. And so with that, we're going to carry on to chapter 24. Who's reading? Kayla. Okay.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Command the children of Israel that they bring to you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, to make the lamps burn continually. Outside the veil of the witness, in the tent of appointment, Aaron is to arrange it from evening until morning before Yahweh continually, a law forever throughout your generations. He is to arrange the lamps on the clean gold lampstand before Yahweh continually. And you shall take fine flour and bake 12 cakes with it, 2/10 of an ephah in each cake. And you shall set them in 2 rows, 6 in a row, on the clean table before Yahweh. And you shall put clear frankincense on each row, and it shall be on the bread as a remembrance portion, an offering made by fire to Yahweh. On every Sabbath he is to arrange it before Yahweh continually, from the children of Israel, an everlasting covenant. And it shall be for Aaron and his sons, and they shall eat it in the set-apart place, because it is most set apart to him from the offerings of Yahweh made by fire, an everlasting law. And the son of a Israeli woman, whose father was a Mitzrayim man, went out among the children of Israel. And the Israeli woman's son and a man of Israel strove in the camp. And the Israeli woman's son blasphemed the name and cursed. So they brought him to Moshe. Now his mother's name was Shelomith, the daughter of Divri of the tribe of Dan. And they put him under guard, that it might be declared to them at the mouth of Yahweh. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Bring the one who has cursed outside the camp, and all those who heard him shall lay their hands on his head, and all the congregation shall stone him. And speak to the children of Israel, saying, Anyone who curses his Elohim shall bear his sin, and he who blasphemes the name of Yahweh shall certainly be put to death, and all the congregation certainly stone him, the stranger as well as the native. When he blasphemes the name, he is put to death. And a man who strikes the being of any man shall certainly be put to death. And he who strikes a beast repays it, body for body. And when a man inflicts a blemish upon his neighbor, as he has done, so it is done to him. Fracture for fracture, fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he inflicts a blemish upon him, so it is done to him. And he who strikes a beast repays it, and he who strikes a man to death is put to death. You are to have one right ruling for the stranger and for the native, for I am Yahweh your Elohim. And Yahweh spoke to the children of Israel, and Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, and they brought the one who cursed outside the camp, and stoned him with stones. And the children of Israel did as Yahweh commanded Moshe.
Okay, a bit of a fracture in the tooth there, but okay, so this command highlights the responsibility of everyone within Israel. And it's given at the beginning of this chapter, when it says command the children of Israel, it's done in a very militaristic way, and for good reason, because it emphasizes the importance of doing what's being called for here. And the clear instruction was that all Israel are to make sure that clear oil of pressed olives for the light is brought in so that the lamps can burn continually. You know, this is a responsibility of everybody to keep the lamp burning. And so it's pictured by the assemblies, etc. And our master makes it clear that he's the one that walks through the lampstands. He's the one that if you don't obey him, he will put your light out. You know, and what we need to recognize here, for a light to burn, it needs clear oil of pressed olives. And so we understand the Hebrew word for clear comes from the word zach, which means pure, clean, or clear. And it comes from the verb zachach, which means to be clear or to be pure or bright. So when somebody says zachach to you, you say, thank you very much. I will be pure and clean. Now, zach is used in Mishle 21 verse 8 when it says, the way of a guilty man is perverse, but as for the innocent or pure or clean, his work is right. And, you know, it's through, when our master says in this world we will have pressure, but take courage, I've overcome the world. The Hebrew word that's translated as pressed is kathith, which means beaten. And it comes from a word which means to crush or be crushed by beating. Because you've got to think, to get an olive, you put it into an olive crusher. Another concrete stone is rolled over the bag that has the olives in to break and crush. And then it's put into a Gethsemane, where the weight of that Gethsemane is just gravity on that causes the oil then to be able to come out. So we also understand that as we are to be lights of this world, there's an element of crushing that will bring about our ability to show that we are walking in the Spirit and keeping the light of our Master intact. Because our Master said in Matityahu 5, when he said to his taught ones, you are the light of the world. Now, he is the light that's come into the world, but him declaring you are the light of the world, he's basically saying you the branches of the menorah, you need to keep burning, you need to keep shining. He also says you are the salt of the earth. And in the context of that, it was in the basis of blessed are you when you are persecuted for righteousness' sake. You're the light of the world, you're the salt of the earth. You know, the idea of salt, the root word for salt, also comes from a word which has the idea of crushing. And salt represents the perpetuity or eternity or aspect of covenant, which Yahweh never breaks. And the lamp burning continually is a very powerful picture that we get here, because we understand in the design of the tabernacle, the lampstand of the 7 lamps would shine on the showbread table, which is in the set-apart place. And we understand that the showbread table, with the bread that was set out every Shabbat with 12 loaves, 6 loaves in each 2 rows, 6 loaves in each row, 1 for each of the tribes. It's symbolic of light is for those in the house. So when we picture that of the Sabbaths and the appointments of our Master coming into the tent of appointment, and light is for those in the house, we get enlightened, if you will, as we break the bread and understand the freshness of his word, and it becomes revelation to us, sustaining us to go out and shine that truth wherever we are. And continually the lamp was to burn. Now, when Aharon would trim the lamp morning and night, it would be done in such a way that there would always be light. As he's trimming one and putting oil and trimming one and putting oil, there's always light that's shining, because the concept is we don't stop shining. Now, any lamp that's never trimmed and filled can't shine. And even in the parable of the maidens, even the foolish maidens trimmed their lamps. But that did them no good, because they didn't have oil in their lamps. So the Hebrew word for continually is tamid, which means always, constantly, regularly, all times. And Tehillah 119 verse 44 says, that I might guard your Torah continually forever and ever. That's how we keep our lamps burning, day and night, is by guarding his word, you know. And the Hebrew word for burn is Allah, which means to go up, because we think of a flame that goes up, it points upwards, if you will. And it's a derivative of Allah, to go up, is the word that's used for the whole burnt offering, the Olah offering, the ascending offering, the one that's burnt completely up. And I mentioned earlier what Shaul tells us in Romans 12, and I'll repeat that, verse 1 to 2. I call upon you, brothers, therefore, brothers, through the compassion of Elohim, to present your bodies a living offering, set apart, well-pleasing to Elohim, your reasonable worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you prove what is that good and well-pleasing and perfect desire of Elohim. Earlier, I just quoted verse 1. Now you got verse 2. In the context of renewing our minds, being transformed, is in the context of presenting our bodies a living offering. Now, to be a living offering, you have to be shining. You have to be on fire. You know, you have to keep shining that light. And as we walk in his light, we also know that the Torah is a lamp for our path, a light for our path, a lamp for our feet. And when we think of lamp and light, I've mentioned many times, a few years ago, I did a message called Lamp and Light. We need them both. It's not that there are two lights, it's the functionality of them. Because the light needs a lamp to contain it. And so we understand Yahweh is light. I mean, he is light. And in him there is no darkness. But he took on the form of man. He took on the form, in a sense, of coming in the flesh of man, so that we could experience that light and embrace that light and be a representation of that light in our own lives as lamps that contain the truth of our Master. And as lamps that lighting our path through the word, we understand the necessity of keeping our eyes fixed on our master so that we don't turn to the left or to the right. Mishle 13 verse 9 says, the lamp of the wrong is put out. That's the lamps of the foolish that have no oil in them. They will be put out. Mishle 24 verse 20 says, there's no future for the evildoer. The lamp of the wrongdoers is put out. So, we see the idea of this is very important for us to understand. And as we think about lamps burning, lamps put out, I'm reminded of something that people traditionally do that they shouldn't be doing. And that is blowing candles out on somebody's birthday. Because it goes totally against the scriptural picture of keeping your light shining. But yet, where does it come from? It comes from a rooted occultic practice of appeasing the dead so that they put a protection around the one having a birthday that apparently they believed on a person's birthday, the spirit realm was opened up and they would be under possible attack if not appeasing the dead. So these are corrupt. I mean, I'm not going to go into the full details of the corruption of that. The bottom line is a lot of people are following corrupted practices thinking it's harmless, but yet it goes totally against the set-apart standards of Scripture. I encourage you to go read an article, Birthdays, Should We Be Celebrating Them? And I go in depth into what birthdays are contained in Scripture. There's only 3, and all 3 of them have bad occurrences. So we learn from Scripture as the standard by which we serve our Master, shining the light and not putting out that light. Joel reminds us continually through Ephesians about being children of light, walking as children of light. He says in Romans that the day is dark. It's time to put off the darkness and walk as children of light. The night is far advanced. We must put on the armor of light. We must walk in the Torah. The Torah is a light for our path. So putting on the armor of light is putting on the Torah, putting on obedience. We also understand very clearly that when the bride is to be watchful, keeping her lamp burning continually, we think of the decorations that the menorah has for us in teaching us valuable lessons. As I said earlier, the menorah has 6 branches, 3 out of one side, 3 out of the other, and it has a central branch. Okay? And we understand this is a picture of Messiah being grafted into him. And on the menorah, there were 22 almond blossoms, which highlights the Hebrew alphabet. And the Hebrew word for almond is shaked, which has the same spelling as shakad, which actually means to watch or to keep watch or lie awake. So we need to be people that are watchful and aware that we are to be guarding righteousness in a day where the world is getting darker and darker and darker. And we are to be like the righteous that are shining brighter and brighter to the perfect day. Not like the righteous, we are the righteous that are to be shining. Chazon 3 tells us about the assembly in Sardis that our Master was giving a message to, and he said the remnant will walk with Messiah in white. And we do this as we keep our lamps filled with oil, walking according to his Spirit, not abandoning the work or belief in love for him and his Torah. It says in Chazon 3, nevertheless, you have a few names in Sardis who have not defiled their garments, and they shall walk with me in white because they're worthy. He who overcomes will be dressed in white robes, and I shall by no means blot out his name from the book of life, but I shall confess his name before the Father and before the messengers. So you see, it is possible for some to be blotted out when they don't obey. And so we understand a wonderful picture in terms of keeping our light shining. And in order to do that, you've got to get rid of the immoral. Clear oil speaks of getting rid of the impurities. It speaks of not having contaminants. How many of you have ever fried stuff in oil? And if you look at that oil afterwards, it doesn't look as clear as what it started with. Now, that's a picture of, you can't use that oil again and think that you're going to get the same result. Okay? Now, I'm not saying we must go and get cooked, but what I'm talking about is the clarity of the oil is a lesson for us on not allowing the contaminants of this world to hinder our ability to shine the way we should be shining, And do not blaspheme the name of Yahweh. This Torah portion ends, we started with 2 chapters about set apartness. Then we get the appointed times. Then we get, how do we keep these appointed times? By keeping the light shining, because the functionality of the tabernacle wouldn't continue if there wasn't light shining. So we're all responsible to keep set apartness as the standard by which we live. Then it ends with this son who was, he had a foreigner for a father, and his mother was of the tribe of Dan. And he blasphemed the name of Yahweh and he was put to death. Our master made it clear. When he was in the flesh of man, he said, you know what, you can mock me or whatever else, but don't grieve the spirit. Because in the flesh, he was coming as a man, subjecting himself to the ways of man, but knowing no corruption. So also recognizing, you know what, your ignorance right now, you're not seeing who I am. But when you grieve the set apart spirit, there is no forgiveness. And here is the same thing. And this is what's going to happen to those who blaspheme the name of Yahweh. They are going to be put to death. They will be destroyed. And this is something that we must take serious, you know. We understand here at the end of the chapter, again, it talks about when anyone inflicts a blemish on somebody else. And then it talks about, what was it? Fracture for fracture? Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. You know, what this highlights for us is right ruling. You initiate the right punishment for the crime, so to speak. So you don't give somebody unfair justice or not justice. How can I say it? Well, justice isn't unfair. Unfair punishment. You give the right punishment for the crime. So you don't give somebody punishment for a fracture when it's only a tooth. Okay, no, I'm saying that's the, you know, and that's where our master also said, you've heard that it was said eye for eye, tooth for a tooth, but he was highlighting, you've got the standard by which you should administer right ruling, but you are corrupting that, and we shouldn't. You know, this, it says in Matthew 5, you heard that it was said eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, that I say to you, do not resist the wicked, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And what's worth taking note of is when Messiah said, it is written, but rather, he didn't say it is written, he said, you've heard that it was said, because he was referring to their attempt at how people were trying to apply this passage where somebody offended their pride. And he was teaching them a lesson. Now, a slap on the cheek in ancient times was the prerogative of a master or teacher to his servant or student. Lamentations 3 verse 30 says, let him give his cheek to the one who smites him. He is filled with reproach. Now, what's being said here is when one is filled with reproach and is rebellious, then you are to give your cheek to the one who leads or teaches you. That's really what it's highlighting here. So that you're sure what he was saying, in essence, he was quoting from Vayikra 24 in that an eye for an eye did not fit the context of rebellion against authority. That's what he was highlighting. Because they were trying to take this, and he was saying you can't now do that when you're rebelling, because now you're trying to resist the need to obey. A servant could in no way use an eye for an eye concept to get back at their boss or their teacher or their leader who disciplined or reprimanded them. That's what they were trying to do. They were being reprimanded for their thing, and they were trying to lash back, and they were trying to use, he says, you're using this eye for an eye thing. No. Give your cheek to him. That's what he's saying. He's not telling people to go slap each other. He's trying to say, submit to the one that's disciplining you. That's the picture that he's getting. This isn't a time to retaliate and strike back. The correct response is drop your offended pride, humbly ask for more teaching so that you'll be able to understand why the slap came in the first place, spiritually speaking. Because sometimes people feel, what's that? Well, that's what he's teaching. Don't be so filled with pride. I'm going to get you back because you got me. Submit to those leading you and obey. This was not about compensation for injury or harm that our master was speaking about. The clarity on this and in other passages, how they twisted his word when he was here in the flesh. And many people are still doing this today as they are fueling their rebellion against his supreme authority. And when you don't submit to his appointed leadership, you are rebelling against his supreme authority. You are blaspheming his name.
When we were reading this, I was remembering how when we were talking about the millennial reign, and Renee was still saying, how can people not obey Yahweh when Yahweh is there and sitting on his throne? But I mean, these people walked in Yahweh's presence.
Yes.
They did that.
Yeah.
Yes, this guy in the camp with Yahweh there blaspheming.
Yes.
And he won't stand for that.
No.
So we always think that if you see him on the throne, you will obey what he says. But they literally were saved by Yahweh. They walked in the desert. They heard his voice.
Yeah.
Not us who hear it via the prophets.
Yes.
They literally heard his voice and they still didn't obey. So it's not something strange.
No.
And that's also why this guy had to be killed, because he was right there in Yahweh's presence.
Yeah.
And he showed no respect.
Yeah. Renee just said earlier on Survivor, when you get voted out, they put out your torch fire.
Because it's symbolic
yes,
of life.
it's symbolic of, life and death. Nicole is saying, as a child, I was raised Roman Catholic, and I remember my mother putting a red thread on my wrist as protection from curses. Till this day, she truly believes that my children are going to hell because I never got them baptized as babes. She condemns me for it, believing that I myself have put my children in hell. That is how disastrous religion and superstition is. Yeah. I think you've protected your children from destruction by not following traditions. So this week's Torah portion, we went a bit longer than normal on the Torah portion for good reason, because it's important that we identify how set apart the Sabbaths and appointed times of Yahweh are, and anything other than his prescribed set apartness is blasphemy. That's the summary of today's Torah readings. And when it's called Emor, say, it's because he says, and that he is Yahweh. He'll speak. Okay, so now we're going to, I can't see my mouse when the screen's dark. Okay, so we're going to go to Yeḥezq'ěl 44, verse 15 to 31.
But the priests, the Levites, the sons of Tzadok, who guarded the duty of my set-apart place when the children of Israel went astray from me, they shall draw near to me and serve me, and shall stand before me to bring me the fat and the blood, declares the Master Yahweh. And they shall enter my set-apart place, and they shall draw near to my table to serve me, and they shall guard my charge. And it shall be, when they enter the gates of the inner courtyard, that they put on linen garments, and no wool shall come upon them while they attend within the gates of the inner courtyard or within the house. They shall have linen turbans on their heads and linen trousers on their bodies. They shall not gird themselves with sweat. And when they go out to the outer courtyard to the people, they shall take off their garments in which they have attended, and shall leave them in the set-apart rooms, and shall put on other garments. And they shall not set the people apart in their garments. And their heads they shall not shave, nor shall they let their hair grow long. They shall keep their hair well trimmed. And no priest is to drink wine when he comes into the inner court. And they do not take as wife a widow or a divorced woman, but take maidens of the seed of the house of Israel, or widows of priests. And they are to teach my people the difference between the set apart and the profane, and make them know what is unclean and clean. And they are to stand as judges in a dispute, and judge it according to my right rulings. And they are to guard my Torah and my laws in all my appointed festivals, and set apart my Sabbaths. And they are not to defile themselves by coming near a dead man. Only for a father or mother, for a son or daughter, for a brother or unmarried sister, they defile themselves. And after his cleansing they count 7 days for him. And on the day that he comes into the inner court of the set-apart place to attend in the set-apart place, he brings his sin offering, declares the Master Yahweh. And it shall be to them for an inheritance. I am their inheritance. And you give them no possession in Israel. I am their possession. The grain offering and the sin offering and the guilt offering they are to eat, and all that is dedicated in Israel is theirs. And the first of all the firstfruits of all, and every contribution of all your contributions, belong to the priests. And the first of your ground meal you give to the priests, so that a blessing rests on your house. The priests are not to eat any bird or beast found dead or torn to pieces.
Okay, so as you will notice, looking through that passage, there's a couple of references to today's Torah readings, and that's for good reason why we read this passage. And just to set a bit of background for the entire passage, Yeḥezq'ěl means El strengthens, or in the strength of El. And it indicated a great deal of the character of this prophet and the nature of his ministry, because he had to walk in the fullness of his calling because he needed to be strengthened by Elohim in order to, when Yahweh says, I'm going to make your forehead like a flint, he was starting fires, by highlighting the people's depravity. What Yahweh showed him, what he had to do before the people, make a hole in the wall, crawl through it, set out a little map of the thing and light fires to it, and he had to do it and lie on his side, on one side for 40 days, and the other side another, 390 days. And at first being told, you must cook your food on human dung. He said, no, okay, you can use cow. It's like, sometimes we often overlook some of the things that these prophets had to do, and they did it because Yahweh is the one that, even Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu, when Yahweh first called and commissioned, he made it very clear, listen, you either do this call or you get destroyed. And I think that same lesson is for all of us in Set Apartness. You either walk this walk or you get destroyed. And it's not going to be an easy walk. You're going to come against confrontation. You're going to face troubles, but you're going to have to stand your ground. You're going to have to not waver in compromise. You're going to have to be obedient. And you need the joy of Yahweh to be your strength. He prophesied concerning 3 different time periods. He prophesied concerning events that would take place in his day. He prophesied about events that would take place at the first coming of Yeshua Messiah, and also about events in terms of the second coming of Messiah and his millennial reign. Yeḥezq'ěl is the only one in Scripture, beside Yahushua, who is called Son of Man. And eschatologically, it's a picture of Yeshua as representation of the word that is needed to be heard. The second half of the book of Yeḥezq'ěl is primarily concerned with the visions regarding the millennial reign as a standard for which would be a mirror against what the corrupted priesthood were doing at his time, when Yahweh showed them all the abominations, now showing them the standard of a righteous priesthood serving Yahweh, where he had to measure the measurements and everything. It was a mirror against them of how far short they had fallen. And in this chapter 44, it shows us the priesthood duties in the millennial, or the millennial reign. And showing this, he's highlighting a clear difference between 2 priesthoods, in a sense. The one in the form of the sons of Tzadok and the ordinary Levites, so to speak. We are to be challenged by the call of Yahweh for us at this time, because I believe that he is busy restoring a proper righteous remnant that serve him in spirit and truth. Now, when we look at the body of Messiah, as I said, we are collectively a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a set-apart nation, a people for a possession. And so there's a priesthood within that, but we're representing the high priest. And there's service and function and form. And we learn from this pattern a great deal in terms of walking and being called sons of righteousness. This is a call to righteousness that's been given through the mirror of this word that this prophet was given as visions of what is to come. Yeḥezq'ěl was in the process of being shown the temple and the millennial reign, and it begins at this beginning of this chapter by him coming back to the set-apart place where he sees that the east gate was shut and Yahweh had already entered. This is, in a sense, a partial fulfillment of what took place when Yeshua came riding on the colt through this gate, but it will ultimately be fulfilled when he comes in the millennial reign. The east gate lies on the western slope of the Temple Mount, opposite the Mount of Olives. It was in the Kidron Valley in the middle, and it currently, we must understand generation to generation, or as cultures build on one another, that you get what you call in Hebrew a tel, where you don't break down everything, you just build on top. So it's almost like, so many of the buildings that are physically there today in Jerusalem might be somewhat higher than the original because you build on top, But what we do take note of, that this east gate was cemented up, or is cemented up, right from early ancient times after our master was already here in the flesh. And it happened to be cemented up because there was a Turkish sultan during the Ottoman Empire, after they'd conquered Israel, who knew that the Messiah would have to come through that gate, according to the Jewish beliefs that he was in opposition to. So he put an Islamic cemetery in front of the East Gate, so that Messiah could not go through it without being ritually defiled. And he cemented up the gate. He did not know, of course, that he was in part causing the prophecy to be fulfilled concerning the East Gate, because it was shut up. You see, the enemy can try and do a whole lot of things, but Yahweh's in control. And Yeḥezq'ěl, while prophesying from captivity about coming events, the people were more concerned about listening to false prophets. They just wanted to, even though they were being proven false, even though they were showing and saying, oh yeah, he was wrong, the truth of the word was being proven true, and the people still didn't want to know it. In fact, they'd like to listen to what Yeḥezq'ěl would say, because he sounds cool, but then not do what he says. They would rather have their ears tickled than face up to the truth. And it's so the same today. It hasn't changed. You know, I often get annoyed, and I try not to, but when people say that these prophetic words of Scripture don't apply to them today. And it's already happened, so it's not for us. They're so short-sighted. So much of what the prophets wrote about still has to be fulfilled. It still has to come, and it clearly speaks of the end days. And so it's time for us as a people to wake up, listen, and do what Yahweh requires of us, which is to be set apart. This passage, we're shown a clear contrast between Tzadok and the ordinary Levites. Now, not all Levites were Tzadokites, but all Tzadokites were Levites in the day. So what this shows us is the same message of showing that Yeḥezq'ěl was shown back then, is that coming kingdom of our master is that we are called to be, when we are called to be a reign of priests, it means we are to rule and reign with him, but within that we understand four functions. I hope I'm not going to have to say, okay, but there are some who are priests. We all understand the reign of priests. It's in the order of Melchizedek, but we're not all priests. Does that make sense? Okay, so the question I ask is, in a type, what priesthood do you belong to? Tzadok, as I said, means righteous. It comes from tzedek, which means to be righteous, justified, properly restored. And in Hebrew, sonship is more than just an ancestral line. It also carries with it the character of a person. For example, we see two pictures of Messiah in the Hebrew context when he's referred to as Hamashiach ben Yosef and Hamashiach ben David. He was Messiah, son of Yosef, who was a suffering servant. He's Messiah, son of David, as a conquering king. Okay, so there's a difference in the character that's described in this son. Yeshua, in his first coming, came in the character of Yosef. Now, Yosef, as in son of Yaakov, he came in that character who also, as a suffering servant, was subjected to a whole lot of punishment, but is one that actually rules and governed and brought about a deliverance for his brothers. He is coming in the character of David as the Melech Tzedek, Melchizedek, the king who is righteous, and he will set up his rule and reign here on earth. So when we see this idea of the sons of Tzadok as a mirror for us today, it's not only linked to an ancestral line, but also to that which represents the character of righteousness, as we are sons of the Most High. When I say sons, collectively it's sons and daughters. Those who are characterized by righteousness in its fullest meaning and form, because we know it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all that he commands, then we can collectively identify the idea of a character of righteousness, therefore see the idea of the sons of righteousness. Okay? Nicole's saying he came in as a servant and will return as King of Kings. Tzadok, who was Tzadok? We have to understand that why does his name or the character of his name carry great importance in terms of the millennial reign and the vision that Yeḥezq'ěl was given? Because at the time of Yeḥezq'ěl, the priesthood was very corrupt. This, what I'm sharing today, is not a completion of the idea of the sons of Tzadok. There's lots of studies going on about it. I'm just trying to clarify this message that's given to us to be a mirror to us today, to make sure that we're guarding righteousness, the garments of righteousness that our Master has given us to be clothed in. Now, who was Tzadok? Literally, as a person. Tzadok was the son of Achituv. Now, he was one of the two chief priests at the time of David, with Eviathar being the other. Now, Tzadok was of the house of Eleazar, son of Aharon, and he was 11th in descent from Aharon. So you can just picture genealogies. He was 11th down from Aharon. He joined David at Hebron after Shaul's death, and he remained committed and faithful to David, even when Adoniah set himself up against David to take the reign, the son of David. When Adoniah set himself up as king, and Adoniah persuaded Eviathar, the priest, to join his party, but Tzadok remained unmoved and steadfast. He was loyal to the true beloved king. He was then commissioned to anoint Shlomo as king, and Shlomo dismissed Eviathar, the last descendant of Ithamar, of which family was Eli, from being priest, because fulfilling what was spoken about Eli at Shiloh, where Elohim told Eli that the priesthood would depart from his house and Tzadok would be made high priest in his place, having the promise of the everlasting priesthood, the covenant that was given to Pinchas, being kept true, as Tzadok was from the lineage of Pinchas. As we see in Bamidbar 25, verse 11 to 13, Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aharon the priest, has turned back my wrath from the children of Israel, because he was ardent with my ardor in their midst, so that I did not consume the children of Israel in my ardor. Therefore say, see, I am giving him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and to his seed after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was ardent for his Elohim and made atonement for the children of Israel. So what we have here is, when you look at genealogically through this, we have a wonderful picture of a remnant line that remained committed to serving Yahweh. A zealous, ardent priesthood, a righteous priesthood, a remnant of zealous priests who were committed to being faithful in their duties to Yahweh, regardless of the circumstances that they found themselves in. And that in itself, as a historical record, is enough encouragement for us to not let circumstances depict our actions. We are called to be a faithful people of Elohim. And as we look at the descendants of Tzadok, we're able to see this faithfulness that is displayed being carried through from a couple of examples, as we see. Number one is from the line of Tzadok, we see Azariahu. Now, Azariahu was the high priest who opposed King Uzziyahu. When Uzziyahu did lawlessness and thought he could go into the set-apart place and offer his own incense, and he was chased out. And remember, he was leprous. Uzziyahu was mad. Yahweh struck him and he became leprous until his death. He was a good king up until that point, but it went to his head. But Azariah, who stood up for righteousness in the face of a king that had become wicked. Takes a lot of guts to speak up. Azariah, who means Yah has helped. And it's a wonderful declaration that his name declares, for where does his help come from? It came from Yahweh. To stand against the sovereign, you needed Yahweh's help for that, you know. We need to stand up for the truth amidst a wicked time. We need the helper. Our Master said he's given us his Spirit to help us, to remind us what we are to do. That was one good person we can see from the line of Tzadok. Another one is Hilkiah. Hilkiah, who was the high priest that found the Torah in the time of King Yoshiyahu. Remember, Yoshiyahu was 8 years old when he began to reign. It was in the days of Yirmiyahu, and only in the 18th year of his reign, when they were doing some reforms, that Hilkiah, who was the high priest that found the Torah, and when the sovereign heard it, he tore his garments, he made big reforms, he broke down all the Asherahs and the Baal slaughter places, and he renewed the covenant. Then, one we all know, coming from the line of Tzadok, is Ezra. In Ezra 7 verse 10, it says, Ezra prepared his heart to seek the Torah of Yahweh and to do it and teach laws and right ruling in Israel. What a wonderful thing. That's what he wanted. They came back from captivity, and all he wanted was, which is what Yahweh wants us to want, and that is seek his Torah. Prepare our hearts, seek his Torah, and to teach others, and to do it and to teach it. These are just a couple of examples of great men, great priests of the Most High in their dedication to walking wholeheartedly in the truth, coming from this righteous line, so to speak. You know, I'm going to read now because we're going to read it just now, but 1 Peter reminds us, I've quoted it a few times, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a set-apart nation, a people for a possession, that you should proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, who were once not a people, but now the people of Elohim, who had not obtained compassion, but now obtained compassion. Beloved ones, I appeal to you as pilgrims and sojourners, or sojourners and pilgrims, to abstain from the fleshly lusts which battle against the life, having your behavior among the nations good, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, let them, by observing your good works, esteem Elohim in the day of visitation. But what is it about the sons of Tzadok that make them so special to Yahweh? They're the ones that guarded the duty of the set-apart place when all Israel went astray. They're the ones who have zeal and jealousy for the esteem and the honor of our Master. Right through the ages, as I said, there's been a righteous remnant, bold enough to stand up for the truth, not back down in the slightest. And this is the character of the sons of Tzadok that Scripture portrays for us. This is exactly what Yahweh is calling for in our day. A righteous remnant in Messiah that will serve him with their all. That, you know, standing up for righteousness is not for the faint-hearted. Pinchas had to stand up. You know, and I know Tzadok is from the line of Pinchas, but it's that zeal that got the everlasting covenant of shalom. We cannot be lukewarm. Today, so many are lukewarm and they don't recognize the danger of being vomited out by our Master. The Tzadok priesthood in type, when I say this, remember I'm talking about the character of which we are to be in the Master, is for those who are truly passionate about the truth, passionate about being true Torah warriors, armed in the armor of Elohim, following and serving the Master in spirit and truth. It's a dedication that requires a full yielding to the set-apart spirit leading your life completely. The modern day son of Tzadok is one who truly worships in spirit and in truth. And that is what we are called to worship in. Yeḥezq'ěl speaks of the linen garments that they wear, and it wouldn't cause a sweat. The linen garments we know in Chazon is referred to as the righteousnesses of the set-apart ones. So in character, it represents this Tzadok priesthood in character represents the set-apart bride of Messiah. And that is Yahweh raising up his bride in righteousness. Without the characteristics of the Tzadok priesthood, we cannot rule and reign with our Master. It's so important that we guard the Torah. It's so important that we guard his name now. Because if we can't do it now, how will we rule and reign with him? A belief system alone does not qualify us to rule and reign with him. If a person cannot obey now, how can Yahweh trust him to rule others with a rod of iron by the standard of the Torah? You know, the lawless get no reward. So the question we should ask as we look, whenever you look at Yeḥezq'ěl 44 like this, do you have the zeal of the Tzadokites? They're the ones that teach the difference between clean and unclean, between the set-apart and the common. And in order to teach others, you have to be living by it. That's why Ezra said he sought the Torah to seek it, to do it, and to teach it. You can't teach it if you're not doing it, you know. Zeal in Hebrew comes from the word kana, which means to be jealous, ardent, fervent. It also means to burn with intense passion for a personal thing, to love, and an emotion that involves a high level of commitment. So, in other words, you can truly see if people are really zealous for Yahweh or not. And if they're starting to cut corners around feast times and Sabbaths, then they're not zealous. Then they're not representing the character of true set-apartness and righteousness. And as we look at the zeal that Yahweh is calling for in the lives of his bride, this is where Pinchas teaches us a valuable lesson on standing up amidst the depravity in the camp. And we understand Pinchas means mouth of brass, and we know that brass also has an ability to cause, if it's well kept and clean, it's very bright, and it can give that essence of glowing or shining, you know. Shaul tells us in Galatians 4 that we are to be zealous always for the good, and therefore not just when people are looking. Because, some people have mastered or tried to master the art of looking very zealous when others are looking on. And in that stupidity, they don't realize that Yahweh is always looking on. The Torah of Yahweh is not a worthless word. As I said earlier, it's our life. How many times you see how people only get a little zealous when the crowd's looking on, when they're gathered maybe for an hour or two somewhere, yet the rest of the week, zeal for the word is the farthest thing from their minds. And it shouldn't be so. 1 Corinthians 12 verse 20 or 31, Shaul says that we are to be earnestly seeking the better gift. Not just sitting around and waiting and expecting things just to happen and fall into our lap. We are to be zealous. We are to be passionate about seeking the truth, exercising the truth by great belief. Our master is a perfect example. He said, the taught ones remembered in Yochanan 12 that it was written, the ardor for your house has eaten me up. That was after he turned the tables of the money changers, because they were corrupting the service in the place. There was a house for nations to learn who he is. Romans 12 verse 11 says, not idle in duty, ardent in spirit, serving the master. We are to have a zeal for what we ought to be doing in righteousness. And the Tzadok priesthood is something that's becoming more and more apparent and visible as we see the day of Yahweh approaching. As I said, another priesthood that's not the priesthood of Tzadok is the contrast between the zealous ones and those who had compromised their duties. I believe what we can see is that's what's distinctly being highlighted in our day. Those who are truly seeking to walk wholeheartedly with the Master, and those who are merely giving a lip service. We sang earlier when our worship today, may the words of my mouth always please you. May the truth of my life do the same. My fruit of my life, the fruit of my life do the same. Because there are a lot of people proclaiming it, but their actions are denying him, And so the Tzadok believer will minister righteousness unto Yahweh, take a stand and judge according to Scripture standard and right ruling, and give the people what they need, not necessarily what they always want. The false believer will compromise. They don't minister to Yahweh anymore, but rather to men. They become men pleasers. Giving people what they want to hear, they mix their worship. The Tzadoks teach discernment and diligently seek and learn the pure and unadulterated word, presenting themselves as a workman approved, knowing how to correctly handle the word. Where the corrupt priesthood, they just want to be politically correct. Where anything and everything's permissible as long as you pay your dues. In verse 8 of Yeḥezq'ěl 44, I know we read from verse 15, he says, the rebellious did not guard that which was set apart unto Yahweh, but have set others over charge over his set apart place. And this speaks of allowing wolves in sheep's clothing to come in and take over the worship, turning it into a corrupt business, if you will, manipulating people by their schemes and their traditions. In other words, you're giving place to an alien, to that which is foreign to the covenants of promise, and giving them the right to assumedly teach the word. I spoke earlier about leaders that are presenting themselves not according to the standard of set apartness are aliens. The Tzadok will quickly kick out the alien. And this isn't some weird movie, Renee. Giving no room for false doctrine. And they're well equipped and zealous for the truth. The Tzadok doesn't mix. Hence the garments of righteousness being kept clean. No mixture in what they believe, teach, and do. They live and teach the word simultaneously. They won't tolerate a whoring spirit and mixing, and won't tolerate corrupted names and false deities. They will exercise a clean lip that our master restores to a righteous bride. The false will compromise, teaching one thing, doing another, mixing their worship with pagan practices, saying it's okay while it's an abomination to Yahweh, the tzaddik remnant walks by belief and not by sight, because Yahweh is the provider. Much we could continue on the differences, but when we look at these in terms of tzaddik and Abiathar defected to the revolt of Adoniah, as I said earlier, and it represents those who attach themselves to false teachers and prophets, seeking their own gain, just wanting their ears tickled. Adoniah didn't invite Nathan the prophet, Tzadok the priest, and seer, because the false will never truly seek for the truth and confirmation from true servants. The false will always seek after the false in order to confirm their own falsehood, just as Rehoboam, the son of Shlomo, did. Just to justify and teach something that's acceptable because, well, they're all saying it's fine. So many people today refusing to walk completely in obedience to the master, they'll rather want a watered-down version that they will find soothe their appetite and think, well, that was a nice thing to hear. Oh, I'll just carry on doing that. I'm not saying hearing the truth is not a nice thing to hear. It's a wonderful thing to hear. It's a wondrous word. But those who are desperate for the truth will forsake all other junk. And no matter what may come, they will ardently seek righteousness and righteousness alone. Did you want to share something?
Yeah, just when you talk about the Tzadok line, I was thinking about the one priest that Yeshua mentioned, Zachariah.
Yes.
He was stoned
Yes.
in the dwelling place. I mean, these two verses, you were talking about us being warriors and standing up. It's in 2 Chronicles 24, from verse 20, it says, then the spirit of Elohim came upon Zachariah, son of Jehoiada, the priest.
He stood above the people and said to them, Thus said Elohim, why are you transgressing the commands of Yahweh and do not prosper? Because you have forsaken Yahweh, he has forsaken you. And they conspired against him, and at the command of the sovereign, they stoned him with stones in the courtyard of the house of Yahweh. And I mean, Yeshua actually named him by name, because he was brave to speak out.
Yeah. You know, the Philadelphia assembly that's spoken of in Chazon is a clear picture in type of righteous or tzadok priesthood or people. They hold fast the truth, guard the word of endurance, and do not deny his name. That's the summary of possessing the witness of Yeshua and guarding his commands. On the other hand, you've got the lukewarm assembly from Laodicea, a picture of a false priesthood that mixes its worship with pagan practices, denied the truth of the word, ignoring the feasts and Sabbaths, adopting pagan titles even if they think they're doing the feasts, accepted mixing as a norm. It's okay, call him what you want because he knows your heart. It doesn't, I've even seen some assemblies today saying, we resort to the contracted name Yah, and we just stay there. Even when it says the Yod Hey Vav Hey, they'll just say Yah, because we don't want to offend people. So if you say this or you say that, you know what, we're not here. Who really knows? Take a stand and know who your creator is. His name is Yahweh.
It's not about you.
It's not about us. It's about him. Yes. Today we can clearly see. No, it's about you desiring to know him.
About you proclaiming his name.
Yes. And for those that aren't sure, I've also done a grammatical study on the correct pronunciation of the name of Yahweh, and you can look at that. And therefore, we need to be on guard against things that are just, because if you read the word, if you just say Yahweh, now Yah is a contracted form of Yahweh, which is typically used in a poetic nature in the Psalms and Proverbs, or at times in praise, which is, there's nothing wrong with doing it in its construct of poetic declaration of Yahweh. When the word literally says Yahweh in the Yod Hey Vav Hey, and you're only saying Yah, you're taking away from the word action, aren't you not? Of course you are. And you're teaching people to do the same. Today we've clearly seen how the false are being exposed more and more, and we can see that lies that have been handed down causing lukewarm worship, that's nothing but a false attempt at worshiping the master. So we need to be a people that are truly guarding righteousness. Yahweh's raising up a righteous remnant. He always has been. He's always got people, and he's calling us to shine the light so that more righteous ones can come. The one who doesn't compromise truth, the one who stands fast in the word, walks in it, fully obeying the commands, the decrees, the statutes, the instructions, all of it. One who doesn't deny his name before others. Because when you break a command or a Sabbath or a feast, which is a command anyway, to do that, because of work, family, whatever, you're literally denying his name in that moment. Because we're supposed to be an ambassador and representation of the name of Yahweh, the name of the one who causes us to be. So we ask today, is the set-apart spirit urging you? Are you being refined by fire? Do you weep at the abominations that you see all around, just as Yirmiyahu did, just as Yeḥezq'ěl did, just as Zechariah that was stoned did, just as Stephanos did, that was also put to death? Are you constantly casting down idols? Don't give up. Keep casting them down. We who have called upon the name of Yahweh and been cleansed and accepted by the blood of Yeshua are chosen. We are set apart. We are a righteous remnant. Righteous sons and daughters. The question we got to ask ourselves in type of at the time of Yeḥezq'ěl is, which priesthood are you part of? Now, I know it's either we're not Levitical and we're not, we are a Melchizedek, that's where we want to be in terms of the royal priesthood. But in terms of the mirror, is it Tzadok or is it Eviathar? Because Eviathar was a defector. In the midst of ruin and apostasy, Tzadok remained steadfast. Because Eviathar joined Adoniah in rebellion against David. Why are you here? I mean, we can go to born for such a time as this and get all, it is encouraging to think of that and stop for a moment. But why are you here? You're here to burn with a zeal for our master. To worship Yahweh and let that lamp keep burning. Then, as righteous remnant, let's be encouraged to keep burning and not fall away. Because Eviathar is a picture of a falling away. Serving as a priest under David and then falling away. The Tzadok priesthood, I just want to highlight here when it says here that they serve without sweat. What does that mean? It's a prophetic announcement of a restoration and deliverance of sinful man into functioning the way Yahweh intended us to function in his presence. We have to go all the way back to understand what this text means to the garden and what took place there. When Adam sinned, part of the curse for Adam would be by the sweat of his face that he would eat bread, highlighting the intensity of laboring for his daily bread. By the sweat of his brow, he's going to have to work that land. It's going to be hard. It's going to be toilsome, Through the first Adam, we've all sinned and fallen short. Yet through the second Adam, Yeshua Messiah, a restoration and renewal is brought forth. And by his blood, he's given us access to put garments of righteousness on and have the ability to eat our daily bread and serve him without sweat, so to speak. What I mean by that, it's a natural functioning thing for us to serve the master in spirit and truth. It's the way we're designed. And in our renewal, that's how we should function. It shouldn't be laborsome, because that's the picture of sweat. It shouldn't be hard to serve the master. The one who saw it was hard was the one who hid his talent and did nothing. But those who came, it wasn't hard for them. They went and worked and said, look what we've done. So here you get this picture of no sweat. It's not just a physiological thing. It's a clear lesson on a reversal of the curse that the first Adam got because he disobeyed. And when we serve in complete set-apartness, we recognize the prophetic picture that this chapter is giving for us here, in contrast to a corrupted service versus the picture that Yahweh was showing Yeḥezq'ěl of a righteous service, that he is restoring. And that's the only service that will be accepted by the master. At the end of the chapter, we also given the assurance the master's blessing will be upon one's homes. And that is, the way you see that blessing on your home is when you put Yahweh first in all. Tithes, contributions, and offerings are for the priests, and this is what's being proclaimed here in the face of a righteous body serving in righteousness. Our master has appointed some to equip the body to maturity, and that is those that he has appointed to receive the first and the contributions and the tithes. And here is a lesson today for the body. Don't withhold giving your tithes. Don't withhold giving your contributions to those the master has appointed to equip the body. Why? So that a blessing rests on your house. With the positive being given here of a promise of a blessing resting upon your house, what we can also take from this is that when you do not give to the priests of today what is due, then a blessing will not rest on your house. And in saying that, we take note in Hebrew, the understanding of a curse actually has the idea of the absence of a blessing. So in the order of Melchizedek, the priests of today are those the master has appointed, as Shaul describes in Ephesians 4. They are to be equipped through the correct giving of putting Yahweh first, through the tithes, the gifts, the contributions. And this is something that needs to be restored. And so while we learn through the lesson that our master gives us who we are in him as a righteous body, this is a call to righteousness, to God to do what he's commanded, so that his yoke is easy, his burden is light. We can keep shining that light. And this chapter echoes a clear call for the remnant to get strengthened in the master and be zealous for his house, guarding ourselves against corruption, against mixing, against compromise. As it says in Daniel 12, verse 3, and those who have insight shall shine like the brightness of the expanse, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. This is who we are in the master. This is what we've been called to. And this is something we should be striving for. So today is the theme of set apartness and righteousness. They go hand in hand. And that is to be set apart and righteous in every area of our lives, not just when we think we need to gather to put on a show. But if you aren't doing that properly, then I can guarantee you're not shining the light in a dark world when you're out there. Renee is saying, I mean more in terms of when he returns, it won't be to sing Kumbaya. Okay, the significant that he rode on a donkey, and when he returns, he'll be on a horse, often used in war. I'm trying to go back, Renee, to what you originally said when you... Okay, let's just see here. I'm just picking up all the questions here. Okay, where did I stop? When the Ruach... I just want to say, I have to scroll back. Sorry. Okay, I saw Nicole's one. Cheryl said, when the Ruach of Yahweh is in the inner man of a believer, his or her light should always shine. Correct understanding of his word enables us to walk in his Ruach in every way. Your fruit will reveal your intimacy with Yahweh. We must never be self-righteous. This is a huge problem. No, we are Yahweh righteous because he's given us what it means to be righteous. Cheryl says, if we're part of the bride in the millennial reign with both women and men, who have their spiritual bodies, be able to serve in the temple as part of the Tzadok priesthood? No, I think what we're given here, we are all, those that are raised in the first resurrection, we're told, will rule and reign with him. And there's functionality within that ruling and reigning. Not everybody will be serving in the temple. There will be a Tzadok priesthood, as here, that will serve him. It doesn't lessen the righteousness of others serving in their renewed bodies and perfection of set apartness. There's different functions that will function in a ruling authority over the world of his rule and reign. And there'll be a lot to be ruling over, believe you me. And then Nicole says, then they are truly blind and need to open their eyes and look around. I'm not sure where that fit in. Renee said, is it significant that he rode on a donkey, a meek animal, and when he returns, it will be on a horse, often used in war? Yes, it is completely significant because he came as a servant. In fulfillment of prophecy in Yeshayahu, where it says, or in Zechariah, sorry, not Yeshayahu, in Zechariah, where it says, see, Your sovereign riding on the donkey, on the foal of a donkey, a colt. Okay, that one. And that's a prophecy in Zechariah that's given of our master's first coming. And Chazon, we see our master coming riding on a horse, and his name is Devar Yahweh, with a sword coming out of his mouth, with which he will smite the nations. I mean, more in terms of when that's what he's saying. It won't be a singing kumbaya, no. It will, well, those who are in the master will certainly be praising him, but the rest will be, it's not kumbaya, it's going to be weeping and gnashing of teeth, yes.
No, but that song will not be sung
No.
by the righteous either.
No, yeah, the righteous won't be singing kumbaya either. Okay. Okay, Cheryl's saying Zechariah Yochanan. Okay. There will come a time that people will seek and will not find. Jackie's saying, thank you once again for excellent, very applicable teachings. Yahweh bless, Yigdal Yahweh. Jillian is saying, yesterday I was witnessing to a neighbor, and at one point she stopped me because I was using the proper name and she didn't have a clue who I was talking about. So she thought that I was part of a cult. That quick conversation grew into 3 hours. Praise Yahweh. Nicole said that people think prophecies are done and fulfilled and of the past. Yeah, no, look, I'm getting cryptic messages here, but I'm trying to figure them out. Look, as we said, there's to think that everything's been done. If everything's been done, then this certainly isn't a righteous reign that we're living in now. We're living in a time where we need to see a restoration being made complete and his authority firmly established. So there's a lot that's still going to happen and is busy happening. In terms of the signs of the end times that our master speaks of in Matityahu 24, you don't have to look too far to see them. And he says, when you see all these, the day draws near. Lift your eyes. In other words, fix your eyes on him. Don't be concerned. He says, don't worry, these things have to happen. So fix your eyes, lift up your eyes. It means keep your eye focused on him and not be looking at all the things that are going to cause you to panic and fear and lose your stand. Take a righteous stand and be firm.
And that's the point of using his name. Because if she had just used the generic title,
Yes.
that person would have thought that they're of the same faith.
Yes.
And they're
We're not.
The
No.
point is exactly
Yes.
that.
So we want people to say, who's that? Well, let me tell you. Shaul went to the Areopagus and he says, let me tell you about this one. You've put statues to everybody. We got one unknown. I'll tell you who the unknown one. The one you don't know, let me tell you, because that's the one you need to know. So let's keep doing that. Okay, so I take it I don't need to read 1 Peter 2, verse 4 to 10. Hey. Or do you want to read it in summary? Who'd like to read? Okay, I think...
Read the whole thing.
No, so let me just get there. 1 Peter, screen's dark. Peter 2, what's it, 4 to 10? Okay.
Drawing near to him, a living stone, rejected indeed by men, but chosen by Elohim and precious. You also, as living stones, are being built up, a spiritual house, a set-apart priesthood, to offer up spiritual slaughter offerings acceptable to Elohim through Yeshua Messiah. Because it is contained in the scripture, see, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, chosen, precious, and he who believes on him shall by no means be put to shame. This preciousness then is for you who believe, but to those who are disobedient, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone, and a stone of stumbling and a rock that makes for falling, who stumble because they are disobedient to the word, to which they also were appointed. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a set-apart nation, a people for a possession, that you should proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, who once were not a people, but now the people of Elohim, who had not obtained compassion, but now obtain compassion.
That's just like the Selah. Thank you for all the readings today. Cheryl's just saying, what a great learning day we have had. Thank you and praise Yahweh. We're just going to keep learning. That's what we must do. We must never think that we've arrived. We are still running this race, and we are called to run it with great endurance and do so with great joy and gladness of heart. And it is such a joy for us to do this together. making our hearts yearn more to be physically together when we're able to even experience this over the wireless. You know, I like saying that word. I don't know why. It just sounds funny. Okay, so let's just keep being a righteous, set-apart people. That's what Kěpha is basically saying to us. Because if we're not, we're going to face the consequences. On that note, thank you, family. I don't know if anybody else has anything they'd like to share before we go off. Anything you guys want to share? Nicole's just saying, what a provision from above. Praise Yahweh for that. It's always good to be able to just, it's like time flies when you're really having fun in the word, you know. So, but we'll let everybody continue having the Salah moment wherever you're at. And I keep encouraging you to reach out to others within the body. Another thing that I just want to highlight, we touched on a lot of aspects on Sabbath keeping, feast keeping. I also want to make it clear that the Sabbath is a set-apart day for Yahweh and his bride. So when I say I encourage you to reach out to others, encourage them, let that be within the bride. This isn't outreach day. So when you are reaching out to fellow believers on this day, that's what I'm talking about. Let the rest of the week be the time when you are reaching others with the light. But for Sabbath, I encourage you to keep the encouragements for within the body. That's because then we're keeping the day set apart. Okay, let's pray. Master Yahweh, we bless and praise you and thank you once again that we can just be immersed in your word that sets us free. It is such a joy for us to read your word, to discuss your word, to have your word made plain to us so that we can grow in our understanding and learn more and more about you and be on guard to not let righteousness and set apartness fail us in any way, but rather that we keep perfecting it as we grow and grow further in the knowledge of who you are. And we thank you for your perfect provision, your care, your love, and your joy over us in the name of Yahushua, our Messiah. Amen and amen. Okay, I just want to see Carol threw one in here just before I prayed. I meant that just as Messiah fulfilled the sheaf after his resurrection, wasn't the outpouring of the set-apart spirit on the Talmudim at Shavuot not the fulfillment of 2 loaves? Romans 8:23, Yahweh works everything for the good. And let's just see here. Where are we? You've got Romans 8:23. The 2 loaves is not a fulfillment of the Spirit being poured out on the believers who were gathered for Shavuot. The Spirit being poured out on the believers for Shavuot is a first fruits of what is to come. Now, a sheaf of that first took place when our Master breathed on his taught ones in a closed room after his resurrection, and they received the set-apart Spirit. Remember, after his resurrection, he spent 40 days with his taught ones, but at times when he appeared indoors with them and he was sharing the scriptures with them and he breathed on them the set-apart Spirit, that was for the Spirit type as, again, a sheaf of the first. But at Shavuot, the believers that were gathered received the set-apart Spirit that he told his other taught ones to wait for. So in the intimacy of those closest to him, there was a sheaf, and then there was the first fruits, showing again in prophecy when Yahweh says, I'll pour out my Spirit on all flesh, and your sons will prophesy, and your old men will dream dreams, etc. So we do see that there's pictures that are given to us that highlight the fact that these events occurred gives us the assurance that there's still a restoration and deliverance to be completed, because the fact that it's been fulfilled in its first fruits shows that there is a definite last fruits or harvest to be made complete.
So you wave the sheep.
Yes.
And then you bring the first fruits.
Yes.
At Shavuot.
Yes.
And the 2 loaves.
Yeah.
They made from that.
Yes.
So the 2 loaves is not all the first fruit.
No, it's of the first fruit. Yeah.
So that's not a fulfillment.
No.
The first fruit is the pouring out of the Ruach.
Yeah.
And that's what she's trying to say, but it's not just the 2 loaves.
No.
It's the first fruits.
Yes. Yeah. I hope that makes sense, Carol. Now I just want to see, she also put here, I just want to see Romans, where were we? 8:23, which says, not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we ourselves also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. Now, what that means is this first fruits of the Spirit, and then he's saying we're waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body, is the fact that we're given a pledge of our inheritance, is the first fruit of the Spirit. We get the fullness of that Spirit when we are changed in the twinkling of an eye.
That's a deposit.
Okay, the 2 loaves represent a symbolism of, by the Spirit, Yahweh bringing the 2 houses back into covenant as one. Because Shaul describes us as a bread, a community, 1 loaf, but now the 2 loaves is a representation of both houses under the sovereignty of Messiah coming together as one, because it was split after Shilomo. But now in the beloved's throne that's established forever, it's a picture of bringing the 2 houses, or Yeḥezq'ěl, the 2 sticks coming together. But the first fruits of that was the Spirit being poured out as the renewal of the covenant, showing that this is a clear witness of now the fact that the house of Israel can firmly be grafted back in. And the house of Yehuda must also be grafted in. So both need to come together. So the waving of the 2 loaves as an acceptable wave offering before the master is symbolic of Yahweh accepting a bride that now has the seal of the Spirit in a wedding covenant, but it teaches us as type a first fruit of a harvest where a full bride will be brought in.
Because there was 120 believers.
120 believers, yeah.
This is also this nice picture. Obviously,
Yes.
12 and a 10th part.
Yes,
Which is
the lost sheep of the house of Israel.
Your first fruit is a 10th,
A 10th part, yes. So all these numbers have unique referencing to always putting Yahweh first, and it's because he first loved us. I just want to see the other, she also said Romans 16 verse 5. I just want to clarify the verses you got here, because in the assembly that's in their house, greet my beloved Epanetos, who is the first fruits of Achaia to Messiah. Okay, he's using the term. Okay, let's just be careful that every time we see the word first fruits, it's not necessarily linked to the feast of first fruits. What he was saying here in the greetings that need to be done at the end of the letter to the believers in Rome was the various houses. And he was saying, hey, you know what? The assembly that's in the house, greet Epanetos, I hope I don't get his name wrong, because he's the first fruits of Achaia to Messiah. In other words, he's one of the first ones of that region to Messiah. Okay, so let's put it like this. If you go out to a family and you go reach somebody else and somebody of that group of people comes, he's the first fruit of that clan or that family. That's come to the truth. Then she's also got 1 Corinthians 15 verse 20. It says, now in Messiah has been raised from the dead and has become the first fruit of those having fallen asleep. Okay, exactly. So with our master, he has to be the firstborn among the dead. He's the first fruit of those fallen asleep, which highlights that nobody was awakened from their sleep before Messiah, because he is the first fruit in the renewed body. Okay, so we need to understand those that Eliyahu, Elisha, that they raised from the dead was still in the corruptible form. But Messiah taking the first from having fallen asleep, remember he wasn't put to death, but in the flesh of man, he fell asleep, but in terms of dying and then being raised in the resurrection power after having witnessed to those in the grave, it's a clear confirmation that his resurrection power is now available to all. Because without his resurrection, there is no awakening from the sleep. Because it's only he who has the authority to cause one awakened from the sleep, from the corruptible body into the incorruption. That's okay. I hope that's the scriptures that you gave, Carol. I hope that's okay. Let's just wait a few seconds. If she doesn't send a thumbs up, she does say today, ? And then thanks. So I don't know when the thanks came in. 57. It was 2 minutes ago. Today, ? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so you're welcome to send me some WhatsApps if you have further questions, and we can hopefully help. I know I enjoy getting a few emails in the week. Okay, so Carol's saying got it. Thank you, Carol. Okay. On that note, beloved family, we'll see you online next Shabbat. And we praise our Master for being able to spend this time. A little bit extended session today because I was very brief. But Yahweh bless you all. And so we just pray his shalom. I've already prayed, so Yahweh bless you. Shalom, shalom.